Even my medical network that I talk to are aghast when I say animal protein. I mean, without animal protein, you'll land up with so many deficiencies, not just of vitamin A, riboflavin, B12. Where do we get our B12 if you don't get it from animal sources?
Everyone has the right to culturally appropriate food. And in the context of India, that's not one kind of food. That's hundreds and thousands of different kinds of food, all of which, by the way, as you mentioned, contain animal protein. We have tribes in the Northeast who may be, killing birds, small birds, and eating it right then. We have some people who eat ants and ant eggs. I visited some communities in Jharkhand who very fascinating kind of achar they make with this ants. And then we do have communities for whom the staple food has been beef, going back to the time of the Rig Veda. I mean, this is something that we need to remind our Hindu brothers and sisters, our high caste brothers and sisters, that, the Rig Veda has recipes on how to prepare meat, how to prepare beef, right? So, this is not something that should be, I think in a human rights framework, this is not something that can be ignored. If someone's traditional food was beef, they have a right to it.
Welcome to the Recovery and Transformation Podcast, the show that links personal health with societal well-being. I'm your host, Sameer Dossani. I'm an activist, a PhD student, and a health coach based out of Johannesburg, South Africa. This show explores the root causes of disease and talks about how people are recovering and transforming every day. Hi, and welcome to another episode. My guest today is Dr. Veena Shatrugna. Dr. Veena is a medical doctor who worked for more than 30 years with the National Institute of Nutrition, or NIN, in India. She held the post of deputy director. During her time at the NIN, she was often the rogue element, pointing out the flaws in the traditional approach to diet and nutrition, and the need to promote a more diverse diet that includes more animal products. What struck me about this discussion was how passionately she feels about these issues and how far we are from being able to have a rational conversation about animal protein in the context of a deeply hierarchical society, where those at the top of the hierarchies tend to be more religiously inclined towards vegetarianism. If you enjoy this conversation, please do remember to like and subscribe. I'm also accepting applications for my new health coaching course, The Evolution Health Method. Details are below in the description. With that, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Veena Shatrugna.
Dr. Veena Shatrugna, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Would you tell us a little bit about you're retired from the National Institute?
I've retired from the National Institute of Nutrition.
You are indeed.
I've spent 36 years of nutrition research. So I was formally trained to be a medical doctor, but I think that helped me a lot. And it was the first few years were very, very disconcerting because the research that was being done was really trying to feed into the grand plans of the nation where people had to
So when you say first few years, what decade are we in? Are we in the 60s or 70s?
We're in the 70s, early 70s, when I joined National Institute of Nutrition. And what I saw happening was very disturbing because it was all right to be short. It was all right to live only on cereals. It was all right because the nation could not afford to give everyone a diet, a Western kind of a diet. Now, this of course appealed to the nationalist sentiments because West was really a dirty word. And so what happened was the elite really lived and ate what was traditionally the best foods, though vegetarian, which meant a lot of milk and curd and paneer and you name it, all the sweets made out of sweet. But for the poor, for the marginalized, for the Dalits, vegetarian diet was advocated with the caveat that if only they ate cereal pulse in a proportion, 4:1 or 5:1 or whatever, they would get adequate proteins. So they really had no business to demand that they get the foods that they were used to. And most poor people did enjoy and like meat and traditionally ate it. In fact, milk was very expensive for them and not available. But the nutritionists gave a recommended dietary allowance, which did not contain adequate milk, no fish, no meat, no eggs, no nuts, no fruits also.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to, see, instead of being scientists, they were trying to be bureaucrats to help the government solve the problem. As a result, we ended up for about 30 years on a recommended dietary allowance that did not even allow increase in wages, because this diet was absolute grass that was being advocated. So whether it was workers, whether it was prisoners, whether it was soldiers, hostels, the poor, anywhere, the food that came from cereal and very little pulse, no eggs, no fish, I told you about it, made it possible to keep wages so low that I think the capital was very happy with that. Yeah. The government had the scientists to back them up, and it went on hunky-dory for many, many years.
Dr. Veena, can I just ask you to explain a little bit this diet that they were advocating? You say 4-to-1 ratio. What does that mean exactly?
It means if you eat your rice and pulse in the ratio of, for instance, if you eat 400 grams of rice and 100 grams of pulse, the rice protein is deficient in lysine and the pulse protein is deficient in methionine. So the ratio take care that your protein quality is very good or as good as meat protein. But very
looking at this theory of limiting,
ate food in this ratio.
Yeah. So looking at this idea of limiting amino acid, and you complement the limiting amino acid.
I've lost.
Yeah, no, I was just saying this is about the idea of limiting amino acids. So lysine being one limiting amino acid and glutathione being another amino acid, right? And so you combine them together. But of course, when we eat animal foods, it's not just amino acids. We're getting lots of protein, lots of vitamins, maybe some trace minerals and so on.
Wait.
And so on.
Yeah, these are issues that come up later because right now you had to make sure that people got enough food, and food in India, it was equated with enough rice or in what roti. So they played upon the sentimental attachment to having enough rice in your kitchen or having enough rotis. Now, science was deployed by the powers that be to make sure that people did not desire to eat what they would have liked to eat, which is meat and eggs and other sources of fish, nuts, etc. So it was like scientifically constructed food which was launched on the nation. So if you look at the recommended dietary allowance, that's all it gives you. Now, it's very easy.
When you say scientifically constructed food, we mean like fortified grains and fortified flours, those kind of things?
No, fortification hadn't come onto the horizon at that time. It was just said that if you ate cereal pulse in this ratio, you would get enough protein. See, protein was the big question. Now, why was protein a big question? We had this famine period in the 60s, and the US wanted to send us protein, milk powder, etc. And the scientists put their feet down and said, we have no protein deficiency. If only people ate the proper ratio. So the fault lay with the people, not with politics behind it. There's a whole attempt at making the government feel comfortable. Look, you don't have to import stuff. It's a lot of foreign exchange. So we were feeding in. When I say we, I mean my scientists who were seniors and being good nationalists. So this is the beginning of the tragedy that India faces on the nutritional front, thanks to the scientific attempt at camouflaging what was in a way camouflaging the whole story of protein, right? It's a different matter that even the cereal pulse was unaffordable because 50%, 70% of populations did not get enough energy. And where was the question of getting enough protein? No, so when you go down 70s and early 80s, there is a whole debate on why do we need people to grow tall? Because it was obvious that there was stunting was massive across the population. And so you had a statistician who used his, magician. he looked at the mean and SDs, Dr. Sukhatme, and wrote a paper to say, why must we strive towards 2SD plus 2SD? Let's be happy with minus 2SD. After all, it is part of the Gaussian distribution, and raises a question of small is beautiful. So remember, scientists are playing around with emotion, playing around with science, playing around with politics and economics to assuage anxieties about malnutrition. Because the government...
To what extent does the caste system come into this discussion? Because I have a feeling the people making these policies will tend to be high caste. And the people
I told you, it is a question of class and caste. And these were, of course, they did not look at the lives of the poor people or the Dalits or the food that they preferred. The fact that people enjoyed eating chicken and meat and eggs and in the tribal areas, birds, a whole range of small animals. They did not, I don't think they looked at the lives of people. They were looking at science, textbooks, and reading, looking at amino acids, proteins, etc. But then there was a caveat that if we are not careful, we'll have massive vitamin A deficiency, because most of your beta carotene is unavailable from the plant foods. And unless you have some amount.
I think we better explain that.
So then we started the massive vitamin A distribution program in the country, till such time that people are able to catch up with dietary diversification. So this is what happens in the early 70s. And the next thing we find is that there's massive anemia, maternal mortality. 30% of maternal mortality could be explained by the anemia, the complications of anemia, whether it was
iron deficiency anemia.
Yeah, iron deficiency. I don't think it's only iron deficiency. Sorry, it was deficiency of all the nutrients. After all, hemoglobin requires multiple nutrients, but iron was easiest to distribute, and they did. Yeah, iron was the major nutrient deficiency, but then this was medicalized and very quickly distributed to pregnant women. So it was seen as a policy that would save women, but it did not try to prevent anemia or to really treat the causes of anemia. So to this time, that's the only program that addresses the question of anemia. We don't know that you require good quality protein for hemoglobin globin formation. You require folic acid, B12, magnesium, vitamin C, a whole range of nutrients. But we have not planned to address these questions. I think the scientists, the West, got bored of anemia. Research in anemia wasn't any longer stylish, and we had solved the problems of anemia in pregnancy, or so we thought, and rest on our laurels. Well, now we are really facing another crisis, but that's for another day. So when I was working at the National Institute of Nutrition, one could see the glaring problems with the resolution of each of these problems. And there were many other reasons, of course, where I just took off on my own, did some studies to show that there was no secular increases in heights of women. In fact, among the poor women, the daughters were shorter than the mothers, which is really unfortunate, because during the growth phase, they had multiple disadvantages which the mother did not have. So in one sense, there was a setback as far as the poor women were concerned. So studies of that kind. Another study which I did, and these were all done without any endorsement from my superiors. I mean, it was impossible to get them to agree to this, where in the orthopedic ward, I found that fracture neck of femur, which is largely due to calcium, osteoporosis due to calcium deficiencies, etc., is 10 to 15 years earlier than what the West reports. And then a study was done on the upper socioeconomic group. They were as good as the Western population. So already we had a class divide in nutritional parameters that were measurable These are measurable nutrition parameters.
So
So
if I'm
it
understanding
goes.
you, no. If I'm
Hello?
understanding you correctly, Dr. Veena, you are saying that there's a perception from the West and even from some of these nutrition circles and so on. There's a perception that India is largely a vegetarian country. And what you are saying is that A, not only is that wrong, but B, to the extent that it is sort of true, it is the result of deliberate and misguided government policies. Is that correct?
Of course, India is not a vegetarian country. In fact, if you know about the castes in India, except Brahmins and the Vaishyas, every other caste has eaten and enjoys eating. It's really the economic inability to buy this food that pushes them to live on rice and more rice, right? The scientists have preferred to give credence to this vegetarian story because it suited their research and also fed into the government's need to believe that they are feeding the nation. The fact that the Green Revolution only produced cereals, I mean, it goes on and on. That and the West also, I think to some extent, the West is responsible, where the whole romanticization of Indian culture, Indian history, Indian whatever ethos. I mean, it's apparently a few scientists were very angry, but Gopalan was such a powerful man. No one could shake up the assumptions with which he pushed his theories. Remember, we've had some so-called giants. And these giants were M.S. Swaminathan in the Green Revolution, Dr. Gopalan in nutrition, and of course, the Milk Revolution was somebody else who was a Christian and not Brahmin. But yes, you're right. It was a construct that was very successfully, which was disseminated. And remember, the elite are the ones that are talking about the country's problem, whether it's the bureaucrats. See, we didn't have reservation in a way that people from the other castes came to the bureaucracy. So they were talking to the Brahmin. If you went to South Block in Delhi, you had Tamil Brahmins talking to each other. So nobody, whether it's Vardarajan, Swaminathan, Gopalan, I mean, these are the names that ring so much, bring in so much of Brahmanism in with them, Ramachandrans, etc. So they are the ones who talked about the country's problems, and the government listened to them, right?
Yeah, and now we have new complications with Gujarati Vaishyas, Baniyas, who are running the country right now and adding.
Oh yes. That's a new problem, and that's for different reasons, of course. This is the whole anti-Muslim, whatever happening in India. That is for other reasons, to attack the Muslims on every front, not just their diets, but also their cultural, whatever, practices. So this is how nutrition comes center stage and takes over the country. And today, when we had COVID, people were walking thousands of kilometers back home. What does the government provide as succor? It's 5 kilograms of cereals per head per month. And that works out to 600 cereal calories per day. 600, which is a starvation level. But nobody questions the government, right? So I think nutrition has been kept away. Nutrition science has been kept away from ordinary people. And we have encouraged people to believe that food is rice and food is roti. If you have these two, you should be happy. And we are still at that stage. Whereas the others have gone on to broccoli and meats and fish and you name it. The ones who can afford it and are non-vegetarian. The Brahmins have guzzled milk in liters and liters, curds, milk, etc. So that's the place where we are in today.
Yeah, Dr. Veena, as I'm listening to you, I'm reminded of the work of Utsa Patnaik at JNU.
Yeah.
And what she has pointed out, and others before her, I think this goes back to Amartya Sen as well, that, even in the grains, in the cereals and pulses and so on, even within that paradigm, the level, while income may be stable or even increasing in some places, the level of caloric consumption in many
Goes
villages
down.
is actually going down, right? So maybe that explains a little
See,
bit the
that
problem.
is.
Yeah, I'm just saying maybe that explains a
but
little bit
I
the problem
had
of the daughters doing less well than the mothers. Maybe that has to do with just fewer calories even in the.
No, but calorie consumptions going down can have other reasons. People preferring a bit of diversity of food, or their energy expenditures have gone down. Instead of walking miles to work, they would be commuting in a bus. I mean, I think we need to investigate that a little more carefully. I think even Jean Reyes and the other guy, he published to show that 100 or 200 calorie decrease in intakes. These can be explained, a better health condition or better health care, so that your needs are not needs are met. I think they're still staying with cereal calories. They haven't got, even Utsa doesn't go beyond cereal calories. She's worried about the 100 kilocalorie decrease. She's not worried about the fact that people don't get to eat enough pulse, vegetables, protein sources like fish, meat, eggs. It's like, let me tell you, the Marxists haven't been any better on this front, because they've accepted a wage which is calculated based purely on calories. You know about Dandekar and Rath, who showed the poverty line is based on calories. You look at the wage structure, and all the trade union leaders came from the left backgrounds. They accepted a wage based on calories. They didn't realize that these calories must come from different kinds of food. Nor did they consult nutritionists, but the nutritionists available at that time were only the Brahmins who were at the forefront. So this is a major problem that we have lived with so far.
Yeah. So what would be
Utsa Patnaik is a product of that time.
Sure.
And these economists just love to play around with figures. But does it make any sense to the lives of people?
Right. So what would be a more reasonable approach? So I think we agree that there are still, and there were at that time, there were many challenges in terms of formulating a nutritional policy for India. What's a more reasonable approach in your view?
I have a feeling that we need to address it on many fronts. And thanks to the new knowledge that is being accepted by the medical profession, that cereal calories are the ones that could be the cause for the huge amount of cases of diabetes that we have. But then this is for a class that is anyway going to be taken care of. But this doesn't trickle down to malnutrition, trickle down to the fact that the other part of the studies that are not available to the population at large, and is that in my studies, I found that a woman who's 35 kilos, 35 for 40 kilos with BMIs of around 17, 17.5, she's 35% fat, okay? Her body composition is such that she's not built any muscle. Now, who's to understand this? Because I remember talking to certain endocrinologists in Vellore and others. Yes, they are anxious, but they don't know what to do. How do you feed adults with such body composition? How do you build muscle in adults? Unless you give them high protein and they also do muscle building exercise. For the poor, we don't have a solution. I don't think anyone is working in these areas. So they are sitting ducks for diabetes, for hypertension, and chronic diseases.
I mean, one very easy solution would be, we have, India is still, I think, one of the biggest exporters of beef in the world, if not the biggest exporter. So, I mean, one could actually use those retired dairy cows or whatever else the sources of beef are.
But you know the problem with beef? There has been a beef ban across the country. In fact, in these elections, one of the biggest issue was that cattle are roaming free in UP. Nobody dares touch them because you can't slaughter cattle. She's your mother. Okay, and I don't know whether you're aware of this kind of sentiment that is. So beef is no, even for those who were eating it. It's not available. It's gone underground. It was the cheapest source of animal protein, but it's not available. It's not a solution that you can.
Yeah, no, I'm very aware of this. So we also run a website called peacevigil.net, which talks about Hindutva and these kind of issues.
What's it called? Sorry? What's the website?
Peace Vigil is the name of our organization.
Okay.
Shireen, my partner, and I run that organization, and we talk a lot about Hindutva, and we've mentioned also this dietary issue once or twice. But my point is that in a more rational system, you have, I mean, the cows are being slaughtered. India is a big exporter of beef to the Gulf and to many other places. So whether they're slaughtered in India or not, it's irrelevant to the cow. So it would be a much better, cheaper source of protein, especially since there are these problems.
BJP, Karnataka, where I'm located, has a stringent law on cow slaughter. If you're found with any kind of meat that looks beef, you can be lynched. I mean, you know the stories.
Especially if you have a Muslim name. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that makes it worse, of course.
Yeah.
But anyone could be lynched. Someone who's transporting cattle, someone who's trying to get rid of aged animals. It's very difficult now. Nobody wants to have cows around, but they are all over, let loose, and nuisance value as far as we know. So that's not a solution.
It's not a solution in the current dispensation, but if there were a more rational dispensation, then perhaps it could be part of a solution.
But who's to talk about this? I think a large number of, not many people, even my medical network that I talk to are aghast when I say animal protein. I mean, without animal protein, you'll land up with so many deficiencies, not just of vitamin A, riboflavin, B12. Where do we get our B12 if you don't get it from animal sources? And
rich people get it from the vitamin shops.
You should get it from?
The rich people get it from vitamin shops, from the health food stores of these things.
Yes. Yeah? But then I was trying to provoke them by saying all these years, many of us did not have a deficiency because we got it from the worms that infested our foods. But today we get clean food, and so there are no animal sources of B12 in our diet. And many people have huge deficiencies. So we are actually getting more and more trapped in a situation where nutrition is going to be a big, big problem. At one end, wages haven't risen. At another end, the vegetarianism that is privileged. Yeah. And other end is people are not able to get the kind of protein that they were fond of or used to and could have access
traditional. To. I mean, I think when we look at, I used to work on the United Nations Human Right to Food. There's a subcommittee with the CESR, the Convention on Economic and Social Rights. This is a long time ago. And the wording that we came up with was that everyone has the right to culturally appropriate food. And in the context of India, that's not one kind of food. That's hundreds and thousands of different kinds of food, all of which, by the way, as you mentioned, contain animal protein. We have tribes in the Northeast who may be, killing birds, small birds, and eating it right then. We have some people who eat ants and ant eggs. I visited some communities in Jharkhand who very fascinating kind of achar they make with this ants. And then we do have communities for whom the staple food has been beef, going back to the time of the Rig Veda. I mean, this is something that we need to remind our Hindu brothers and sisters, our high caste brothers and sisters, that, the Rig Veda has recipes on how to prepare meat, how to prepare beef, right? So, this is not something that should be, I think in a human rights framework, this is not something that can be ignored. If someone's traditional food was beef, they have a right to it, right?
See, you're talking about a literate society that respects human rights. But we are at a stage where nobody wants to listen to this. And even if you insist on talking about beef, etc., there is a whole sentiment that is thrown back at you about the cow being your mother and how could we slaughter her, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of people who have been trained to now attack you the moment you talk of beef. You'll have trolls, you'll have all kinds. I mean, the human rights doesn't sell anymore. We've gone back, I think, in time, I would say even pre-emergency days. Those days were compulsions because we could not feed a population, so we tried saying that cereal pulse should be adequate, though pulse was such an expensive food and not available. But today it's very different. Yeah. As you say, beef could be a very, very important source of protein, but we've reached a Hindutva stage where this can't even be discussed.
But the sad thing is that, I mean, so let's talk about chicken for a second. Because when I'm in India, that's one of my main complaints, is that the only non-veg food that's readily available, that's somewhat readily available, is chicken. And it's very tasteless, not very good quality chicken. And I know the nutritional profile of it is not very good, you know? So it annoys me. Eggs is better. I'd rather have eggs than chicken in terms of a nutritional profile. What are your thoughts on chicken in India these days?
Chicken is closest to what you would say most common, because mutton is very expensive. And so it's kept for really big occasions. I'm talking of the large low middle classes. I suppose the rich can have it every day. And mutton is not easily consumed because it's so expensive. Even chicken is consumed once a week. On a Sunday, the family will buy about half a kilo, put enough spices, chilies, etc., so that a family of 6 or 7 can eat it at one meal. So you can imagine how much each one gets, less than 100 grams really. So it's a delicacy that they keep for a Sunday, and it's not a food that is available every day. Eggs might be once or twice a week, depending on the class of the person we are talking about. The only source of protein is, see, the regular diet of poor people, and I'm talking of low middle class also. It's cereal plus a pulse on one day, cereal plus a rasam or a chutney on the other day, not even pulse. So rice with some kind of a hot, spicy chutney or rasam as it's called is what is eaten. Even curd is not eaten every day. Forget about milk. They might have tea once or twice a day, and milk in the tea would vary depending on how much they can afford. A family would buy 200 ml of milk, which the head of the household, the wife, and the older children might make 4 or 5 cups of tea. So you can imagine 20, 30 ml of milk is all that each person gets. So there are diet surveys to show you what is abysmal amounts of animal protein that people consume. It's not surprising at all that we are in such a bad state. And the government lives in denial. The easiest way for the government, whenever we have the hunger reports or any other report, is to say that this is not true. The West is manufacturing data, is all. And yes, that is one way of addressing the problem. And unfortunately, the National Institute of Nutrition, which was regularly collecting data on diet intakes, that section of the departments have been closed down. So we don't have any organization that collects diet intake data. We have NSSO, which collects information on what people purchase. And the assumption is that there is a proportionate distribution in the family. But actual intakes, we don't have access to any data.
But we know from previous data, for example, that girl children, daughters, are likely to be fed less than boys.
Hello, come louder.
No, I'm saying we know from previous existing data that girls will be fed less than boys, for example. We know that there's a gender disparity.
Sorry. I don't believe you. This is again a Western construct. In poor households, there is such little food that there's no place for discrimination of girls and boys. The boys may be a little privileged because they manage to take a little money from the mother, run around and buy a biscuit packet, the glucose biscuits that are sold, Tiger biscuits, 2 or 3 biscuits in a pack with 1 rupee pack. The girls and the boys, the deficits in heights and weights are not different. I'm sorry, this was the anthropologists of the West who loved to endorse the fact that Indian women are oppressed, pushed their agendas into nutrition. No data proves what you're saying. I'm sorry about it. I'll show you data which shows that the deficit, yes, except anemia in women in the reproductive age group, yes, women have more anemia.
But there's a biological reason for that.
Yeah. But otherwise, weights and heights are not different. The deficits are the same.
Interesting. So I think the figures that I'm thinking of are...
It's very comforting to say the men are oppressing the women. The state has no responsibility after that.
No, I agree with you. I agree with your bigger picture that it's the state that is ultimately responsible. But the study that I'm recalling, I'll have to look at it. It was at least 20 years ago.
I've lost you, or you've lost me.
No, I'm referring to a study about 20 years ago done in Rajasthan and Punjab, I think. So I'll look at the data, and you show me your data. It'd be interesting to see. Now that I think about it, it wasn't a huge difference, but it was a slight difference. I'll look at it again.
It depends on how large your sample was. The other thing that the Western anthropologists love to say is that my data connection is unstable. Sorry. Western anthropologists, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes.
Love to say is that girls eat last, women eat last. For God's sake, if I'm cooking food, I don't want to eat first. I want everybody else to taste it, eat it, and then I want to sit and enjoy the food. I can't eat first. I don't want my cultural practice to be changed because I must eat first. I mean, these things don't appeal to me at all. But that doesn't mean I eat less. Proportionately, even I'm hungry, like my partner is or my children are. So the anthropologists actually give another spin to our lives, and that hasn't helped us very much. Because people love to cling on to this kind of statements. They're very stylish and very appealing. So what if women eat last? Because they cook, and it's very nauseating because you're inhaling all the aromas of food that you just don't want to start eating first.
Okay, so as we move this conversation to a conclusion, I guess the basic premise is that everything we think we know about nutrition is wrong. One question to you is why isn't the Congress Party or other opposition parties talking more about food and nutrition? You think this would be a very popular issue to talk about?
Well, I think 2 states did talk about food, and they didn't talk about nutrition. They talked about, that Tamil Nadu, the government, DMK government, etc., came to power because they talked about the school lunch program and giving adequate rations. And rations in India do mean cereal, with sometimes pulses and oil, but nothing more than that. And then when NTR came to ask for votes in Andhra Pradesh, he talked about 2 rupees rice. So except these 2 states, the others have not talked about address the questions of hunger. COVID, unfortunately, has helped Narendra Modi because he distributed, we had some 60 million tons of cereals in our godowns, and he gave 5 kilograms of cereal per person per month. And that, I think, got him a lot of votes in UP because people felt that he at least took care of them. That was the imagery that he sold. Every bag of rice that was given had his photographs on it. So they said, at least he took care of us. So there's more drama than substance in what is happening on the food front. And with no data available, no new data being collected, it'll be a long time before we can place this before any government or organization, etc. It's true that smaller parties are talking about food. For instance, AAP in Delhi wanted to make sure that the rations were distributed to the homes, which the BJP disallowed, right? So there are little things happening across the country. But the biggest problem was the beef ban, which has taken away good source of protein from the lives of the poor.
Yeah, and I think there's another related problem, which is that there is almost an ideological conviction that humans don't need to have animal foods. So what would you say to someone who listens to this interview and says at the end of it, this is fine, Dr. Veena, but at the end of the day, humans can thrive just on dal and rice or dal and roti. What would you say to such a person?
Well, if the person is serious, they're just being provocative, I'm not interested in answering. But if they're serious, then I would point to the fact that you would have multiple deficiencies very soon. And this is not a food that you can carry on too long. Yes, children will be shorter, you'll have more body fat than muscle and lead to chronic disease. If you're a serious person, I would engage with you. Otherwise, I'm not. For instance, vegans are constantly around provoking. I don't want to address them at all. I find it's a waste of time. And they will figure it out if they are serious. They can live on badam milk, almond milks, etc., if you can afford it. What about the poor? And it doesn't make sense to them, because they think almond milk is a substitute. You have all kinds of exotic foods that they will talk about. I'm not interested in engaging with people who are not talking about the lives of poor people. If they are, yes, I would like to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very helpful. And it's important to recognize when we're talking about the lives of poor people in India, depends on your definition. But we're talking between a fifth and a half or 2/3 of the population. I mean, there's a huge majority of the population, or a huge percentage of the population, who are not getting enough calories, let alone dietary protein, let alone minerals. And the other thing that we touched on, but just bears repeating, is that when we're talking about vitamins and minerals, there are many vitamins. Vitamin A, you mentioned, vitamin K2 is one I would add to the list, that are just simply not available in plants. Yes, beta carotene can be converted to vitamin A, but certain people don't have the genes to do that very well. And in fact, I believe the studies are now showing that that's also a conversion process that gets worse with age. So as we age, we're less likely to be able to convert to usable vitamin A. The B12 that we get from vegan sources or whatever, it's not real B12. It's a B12 analog that looks slightly different. Again, some people can convert it, most people can't, which is why we see such big B12 deficiencies in some of our vegetarian clients. So with that, anything you'd like to add, Dr. Veena, before we wrap up?
Well, I'm really not sure what else you want, because this whole discipline is huge. And maybe we can think about it and
have another conversation at another time.
Keep in touch, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Whatever you're doing there. Right now, our biggest problem is that the government has now decided to fortify all the rice with iron and distribute it to the poor people. That is, iron fortified rice is going to be mandatory for those who are getting the public distribution system rice. And we have huge problems, because there is a relationship of, if you don't have other foods in your diet, that is good quality protein and B12 and folic acid, just plain iron is going to increase your ferritin levels, which are clearly associated with chronic diseases later.
Ferritin is some of us use it to measure our iron stores and to know whether we're supposed to give blood and so on. But most doctors use ferritin as a surrogate for inflammation. It's a marker of inflammation. Yeah.
No, but in India, you can always use C-reactive protein for infections, etc. But high ferritin levels don't necessarily mean that you are adequate hemoglobin, especially if you don't have enough of the other nutrients. It is in fact associated with increased diabetes and hypertension. That is the new problem facing us, and some of us are involved in trying to understand. The distribution has started in large number of districts. The small millers who used to supply the rice now cannot do the fortification, because it requires quality control, it requires machinery, etc. So not only will they lose their livelihoods, but the poor will get a rice which maybe they should not get, loaded with iron. And we don't know what will happen with huge areas which have sickle cell anemia, which have thalassemia, tuberculosis, acute infections.
What about gastric issues? When I have clients who take too much iron,
we have no idea, and nobody's.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, when I have clients who take iron supplements, I see a lot of gastric issues like constipation and this kind of thing.
Yeah, but those are much smaller issues. Some children are complaining of diarrheas, but those are much smaller. But if you have a public health program to supply iron fortified rice, I think one must see beyond just the cramps and the stomach pain and the diarrheas. And India is heading towards a new kind of nutrition policy, which might prove to be problematic. But nobody is willing to listen, because the big lobbies are sitting there waiting to collect all the food grains to fortify it and distribute it. Yeah,
I mean, if I'm being very cynical, I'll say that this has nothing to do with nutrition at all. It has to do with consolidation of the food market, so that everything has to go through these Adanis and Ambanis and whoever. They will be the ones who have to sell.
But the justification is the huge amount of anemia. The justification is the kind of anemia that we have, which is still 60% in women and 40 to 50% in children, etc. So that is being used to launch this program. That's a new problem that's on the horizon.
Fantastic. Dr. Veena, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. I look forward to, fantastic.
Yeah.
No, I look forward to having another discussion sometime soon.
Hopefully, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was nice meeting you. Yeah.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Dr. Veena Shatrugna. For more content like this, please do check out my website, sameerdossani.net. You can also apply to join the Evolution Health Method at the link down below. With that, I'm Sameer, your health coach and PhD student based in South Africa. I'll see you next time.